Yo, what's up? Today I'm gonna take you through a technique that I've been using for a little while now. It's a sound designy sort of thing that I've been using to take sounds that I make out of context in sound design sessions on that have movement in them, and kind of mold the pulse and the groove that is within them to the situation that I want to use them in. Um, so I think the best way is to just show you. So I've got this little Ableton project. Well, it's it's not a project, it's just a loop of my sounds that I've been working on recently. And I've been using this technique in here to give these basses a bit of extra movement, a bit of extra pulse that suits the groove of the track. So the first place I used it here is on this bass. I will show you how exactly to build the rack later on a slightly different sound, so you can see how I built it, but I'm just going to show you how it sounds first of all. So without it turned on, these basses sound like this. Just these first two that I've used it on in this section. So when I turn the audio effect rack on, hear that extra movement that's coming in there. Now you're going to need decent headphones or monitors really to be able to hear this, but if you're watching this video I'm sure you have one of those too. So if we have a look at the automation there, that's what's happening. This parameter here is being automated through this macro. Now the chain itself is, first of all, this chain that's been low cut and frequency shifter, and then the frequency shifter is what's doing most of the work. This chain is creating the phase movement, and now the reason that it's making phase movement is because I have this dry chain underneath, and what's happening is this chain is being slowly pitched down or pitched up against the chain that's not. So when one is pitched up, phase movement starts to happen, gets quicker. Will get quicker and quicker and quicker, and the same here. The one will be pitched down, and phase movement will start to happen. Now, the reason that I don't just automate this parameter, that's what I used to. I used to just automate this parameter here, but you end up having to do really small little automations, which is fiddly and no one really wants to do. But recently I watched an episode of In the Door with Culprit on it, which you should all check out because it's sick, and you'll learn some cool shit. Is that you can, you can macro a control, and then control exactly how much that macro is going to move the parameter. This is really useful because you can really fine tune stuff like this, which I would 90% of the time with sound design, that's what it is. Fine tuning. Oh, why is my camera turned? Back. Back. There we go. Sorry about that. Back in OBS. Right, yeah, where were we? Yeah, it's much more controllable, and sound design 99% of the time is about fine tuning till you find that perfect point, because you know often with effects, like, most of what it does isn't going to sound good and isn't going to be usable. So being able to really fine tune stuff and find that sweet spot is really, really important. So that's why that's an important step here. So if I now play you the sounds in context of the tune, I'll play it with the effect off first of all. Yeah, it sounds alright. I mean, the basses sound fine, but when I turn it on, hear how that movement just helps the tune to roll really nicely. because I can draw it in exactly the way I want. So if I 8-bit it with the tuner, now you could get a similar effect with like a phaser or a flanger or something, but I like the way that this allows me to just draw, and like once you've used these things a few times, you get to know how they work. And I feel I have a lot more control using an effect like this rather than something like a phaser. So this EQ, not 100% necessary because this sound doesn't have a whole lot of sub in it, but there is this low harmonic down here that, I don't know, if I could turn the I just think it cleans it up a little bit. Like phase movement, you don't always want in, you know, those areas that are verging on sub. People worry too much about, oh, you can't do it. I see people try and cut movement out of their basses all the way up to like 150, 175 hertz. They hide the bass solid. But movement in that area can be really cool. It can sound really, really good. So definitely experiment with it if it's not something you do already. So there's a couple of other sounds I use this technique on here. The bass fills, it works great for that as well. So here, yeah, what you see, we've got the same rack with the frequency shifter. This is what fill sounds like with it off. Fairly standard kind of squarey fill. I can't remember how I made it. When I turn the effect on, hear that movement that comes at the end here, because the movement starts off very subtle, like because the sound's only being pitched a tiny bit, and then when it reaches this point here, the movement speeds up a lot because it's reaching the point where maybe the sound's being a semitone or half a semitone up from the original. So that's a really nice way of being able to say, I want my sound to build and climax at this point. Yeah, with the movement, you can just draw it in. So I'll play that in context again. So that's with it on. So I think it works really well for fills. It's also on this one. Quick. And that's with the effect on. That's with the effect off. Again, I say I just want it to build up this point and then down again. Really easy, really cool way to control your sounds. Now I'm just going to build the rack out on this sound here, which is one of these basses just dragged out because these are all made from long audio files, because that tends to be the way I work. Okay, so let's put a span on here as well so we can actually see what's happening. I'll show you how to, because my span isn't set, I haven't saved the preset. This is a really good way of looking at what's happening in terms of phase movement using span. I usually just use Ableton Spectrum because it integrates well, but if I want to do this, then I use span. So you first of all want to set it to dual mono mode. My average time a little bit and turn the field display off because I don't like it. Then we want to have the underlay as the right channel and change the colors because I can't change the color of that for some reason, but didn't make the right channel. Why is that? I don't want it to be filled. Dual mono. Right, there we go. Right, now we change the color of this one. As you can see, when the pink one is the left channel and the green line is the right channel. So when they line up nicely like this, that means they're in phase. You can see there's a few pieces out of phase there. So when we build this effect rack on it, we're going to see where the phase movement is happening, and we're going to start with the frequency shift, because that is the, make sure you put it before the fine. So you want a frequency shifter, put it in a rack, which is Control G. If you didn't know, I'm sure you do. Create a new dry chain by right clicking, and then we want to macro this to macro 1 to 0. Check our maps, and I usually start with -20 to 20 hertz. Now it doesn't actually move the sound 20 hertz up because we're using the fine hertz, which is working in decimal places. So now we want to draw in some automation here. So let's this sounds. You see when the extreme end of either of these, you get fast movement. See the difference? So yeah, these peaks are moving up and down. Change in volume. Yeah, when I turn it off, they're just flat. Turn it on. Ooh, this harmonic's getting boosted quite. So after this process, you know, I tend to process with some kind of multiband compression. If there's sometimes you get stuff that you don't want, certain peaks stick out like you didn't expect them to, but lots of the time it's kind of happy accident territory, I find. And so let's just have an experiment with some different kind of curves, see what else we can get out of the sound. Now if we wanted to cut out the movement from the very lows, we just put an EQ on this channel here, 65 hertz. Now we get our sub staying nice and solid. See how you can just kind of, it's really nice to be able to draw the movement in with an effect like this. I find like across the time axis, rather than just banging a phaser or a chorus on it and hoping that the movement sounds good. I find this is a much more effective way of doing it because of the control that you have. So that's basically it. You guys think of any other cool uses for this sort of effect, or any ways to develop it further, be sure to let me know. You can get me at Elijah Beats on Twitter, or on my YouTube. Leave a comment below, and you know, take this idea and see what else would work. You know, I mean, this method of using an audio effect rack of a dry chain with a wet chain and then automating parameters is really cool. You can do it with lots of effects. I think the one Culprit discusses in that episode of In the Door I mentioned earlier is a custom tape wobble effect where he uses a macro to control a millisecond delay and where you can draw in movement that amounts to tape wobble essentially, and is far more controllable and precise than a tape wobble emulator, which is essentially just an oscillator, that sort of effect. So yeah, try this out on some other sounds, try it out on your basses, let me know how it sounds, and I'll see you next time.